Story 1. Did you know that cruise ships have their own jails? If you knew that already, consider yourself well informed. But if you're hearing this for the first time, you're in the same boat as me. Pun intended. I learned this unsettling fact in a way that no one would ever want to experience. Let me take you back to 2018. My family, comprised of my parents, Lisa and Mark Harris, my younger brother Jake, and myself, Emily Harris, decided to embark on a vacation unlike any we'd ever had. We had never been on a cruise before, and the idea of sailing across the ocean seemed like an exciting adventure. So, we booked a 7-day cruise departing from Miami, Florida, and heading to the beautiful Bahamas. As a 17-year-old, I was bubbling with excitement. I had heard so much about how wonderful cruises could be, and I was eager to see it all for myself. My parents were just as thrilled, looking forward to relaxing and spending quality time together. Jake, at 14, was excited about the idea of endless activities and maybe even meeting other kids his age. Our departure from Miami was smooth and filled with anticipation. The ship, the SS Atlantic Horizon, was a massive vessel, like a floating city with restaurants, pools, and entertainment venues. The first few days were filled with exploration and adjustment to the rhythm of life at sea. The days blurred together as we enjoyed the buffet meals, attended shows, and participated in various activities. But as the days passed, the novelty began to wear off. The excitement of being on a cruise slowly faded into the realization that, despite the ship's grandeur, it was essentially a hotel on water with countless strangers. The daily routine started to feel monotonous, and the ocean, which had once seemed so vast and inviting, now appeared endless and isolating. The highlight of the trip came when we docked in Nassau, Bahamas. We disembarked and spent the day exploring the island's markets, enjoying the local cuisine, and soaking in the sun. For a while, it felt like the vacation was living up to its promise. But on the 7th and final night, I felt a strong urge for solitude. My family was enjoying their last dinner at the dining hall, celebrating the end of our voyage. Jake was playing video games with some new friends he'd made on the ship, and my parents were relishing their final night with cocktails and live music. I decided to take a walk on my own around the deck to clear my mind and savor the sea breeze. It was late and the deck was quieter than usual. I made my way to the bow of the ship where the view was spectacular, but also somewhat intimidating. The moonlight cast a silvery glow over the ocean, making the dark waters shimmer eerily. I leaned against the railing, gazing out into the abyss, my thoughts drifting. The endless darkness of the ocean was both mesmerizing and unsettling. I found myself wondering, what if someone fell overboard? How would they ever be seen in this darkness? My grandmother's necklace, a delicate piece of jewelry she had given me before she passed away, caught the moonlight. I felt a pang of nostalgia and sadness. It was a precious memento, and in that moment, I felt a connection to her, despite the overwhelming blackness around me. Just then, I noticed a man approaching. He was tall and had a friendly demeanor. His name was Steve Wilson, and he was in his late 20s. His dark hair and easy smile seemed reassuring at first. He greeted me and introduced himself. We began to chat, and he seemed charming enough. But as we conversed, I became increasingly aware of how isolated we were. The bow of the ship was deserted, and the quiet made my unease grow. Despite my initial wariness, I tried to stay friendly. I told Steve I needed to return to my family. As I turned to leave, he suddenly grabbed my arm with a firm grip. His touch felt unsettling, and his gaze fixated on the necklace I was wearing. "That's a beautiful necklace," he said, his voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. Panic surged within me as I tried to pull away, but his grip was unyielding. Before I could react further, Steve yanked the necklace off my neck, causing me to gasp in shock. "Give it back!" I shouted, my voice trembling with fear. But instead of releasing me, Steve slapped me hard across the face. The sting of the blow was sharp, and I stumbled backward, clutching my cheek. My heart raced as he pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me in a bear hug. I could barely think as I struggled against him. His strength was overwhelming as he tried to lift me over the railing. My screams echoed through the night, mingling with the sound of the waves crashing against the hull of the ship. I fought with every ounce of strength I had, kicking and clawing, but Steve's grip was relentless. Miraculously, two crew members, John Peterson and Marcus Lee, heard my cries for help. They came running, and I saw Marcus tackle Steve while John pulled me away from the dangerous edge. I was trembling, my tears flowing uncontrollably. John and Marcus radioed for backup, and within minutes, a team of security officers led by Officer Taylor arrived on the scene. They quickly detained Steve, who was cursing and struggling as they escorted him away. It wasn't until then that I learned what the brig was. One of the crew explained that it was the ship's jail, where they kept those who caused trouble. As I was comforted and given a blanket, my family arrived, their faces etched with concern and relief. My mother wrapped me in a tight hug, while my father's expression was a mix of anger and worry. They were horrified by what had happened and were grateful to see me safe. The ship's management offered us a full refund and a 5-year pass for their first-class suites as compensation. Despite their efforts to make amends, the traumatic experience left a lasting impact. The following day, as we docked back in Miami, Steve was handed over to the local authorities, facing charges of assault. I never found out what his sentence was, but I hope he faced justice for his actions. So that's the story of how I learned that cruise ships have jails. It's a memory I'd rather forget, but it's a reminder of how quickly things can go from relaxing to terrifying. I hope this serves as a cautionary tale and that you enjoyed this unsettling but true fact. Story 2. What makes someone snap? Is it stress, jealousy, rage, or perhaps something more insidious like cabin fever? I don't have a definitive answer, but I do know one thing for certain. What happened to me on a cruise a few years ago was nothing short of a nightmare. Let me set the stage. It was 2021, and my then boyfriend, James Collins, had recently received a major promotion at his job. To celebrate his success, he decided to treat us to a luxurious getaway on a cruise. We were ecstatic, as this was our first time in first class, and everything felt opulent and grand. The cruise departed from the bustling port of Miami, Florida, and was set to return to New York City after a week-long journey. The ship, the MS Atlantic Sovereign, was a marvel of modern luxury. We were pampered beyond belief, and it felt like we were living in a dream. We enjoyed world-class performances during the day and danced the night away in exclusive private clubs reserved for first-class passengers. It truly was a fairy tale experience, until one fateful night. It was the night before we were scheduled to return to port in New York. James and I had decided to retire early. We were in our elegant cabin suite, which overlooked the vast, moonlit ocean. James was in the bathroom, brushing his teeth, while I was lounging on the bed, scrolling through Instagram on my phone. That's when we heard a loud, urgent knock on our door. Loud knocking, I called out to James, asking if he had ordered room service. His voice came back from the bathroom, saying he hadn't. Curiosity and a touch of unease drove me to the door. I was about to open it, but something made me pause and peer through the peephole instead. I'm convinced that small action saved our lives. Through the peephole, I saw a man who looked disheveled and frantic. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes were wide and wild, and there were ominous red stains smeared across his shirt. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I eventually began to heal, but the impact of that night lingered. The experience has made me vow never to step foot on a cruise ship again. The luxury and beauty of the oceanic escape were overshadowed by the terror of that fateful night. So, there you have it. A story of how a seemingly perfect vacation turned into a nightmare. I hope it serves as a reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control and how important it is to always be aware of your surroundings. Story 3. What exactly constitutes evil? Is it the act of taking another person's life? Is it causing harm to those who are innocent and vulnerable? The nature of evil is subjective and often debated, but the story I'm about to share exemplifies what many would agree is the darkest form of human malevolence. In December 2019, my family and I embarked on what was meant to be a joyful and festive Christmas cruise vacation. We had planned this annual holiday tradition for years, taking a break from our busy lives to enjoy a luxurious escape. This year, our destination was the Caribbean, and we set sail from the vibrant port of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, aboard the magnificent MS Emerald Voyager. The ship was renowned for its opulence, featuring everything from elegant dining rooms to exclusive clubs and entertainment venues. The cruise was as splendid as we had anticipated. The days were filled with sun-soaked relaxation and festive cheer, while the nights were vibrant with live performances and dancing. My 22-year-old self, along with my younger sister Jessica, who is a registered nurse, were reveling in the luxury and excitement of the trip. We had enjoyed every moment, from the extravagant dinners to the late-night parties in the ship's private lounges. It was the night before our scheduled return to Fort Lauderdale, and the atmosphere on the ship was electric with anticipation. My boyfriend Adam and I decided to take a late-night stroll to soak in the last of the cruise's ambiance. Jessica, ever the adventurous spirit, joined us for a walk towards the bow of the ship. The night was crisp and clear, with the stars twinkling above and the gentle sway of the ship adding to the serene experience. As we strolled along, chatting about our favorite moments from the trip, our tranquility was abruptly shattered by the sound of blood-curdling screams. Jessica and I exchanged worried glances, and our instincts immediately kicked in. We sprinted toward the source of the screams, our footsteps echoing in the empty corridors of the ship. Reaching the stern of the ship, we were confronted with a harrowing scene. A woman in her mid-30s stood near the railing, her appearance disheveled and her behavior unnervingly detached. She was laughing hysterically, her laughter jarring and out of place. Jessica, with her medical background, approached the woman cautiously, her concern evident. "Are you okay?" Jessica asked, trying to understand the source of the woman's distress. The woman's response was more disturbing than her laughter. She continued to laugh uncontrollably, her eyes glazed over as she pointed over the railing. Her behavior was inexplicable, and Jessica and I followed her gaze to the dark expanse of the ocean below. What we saw was a sight that will forever be etched in my memory. In the pitch-black waters, barely discernible against the void of night, two young children were struggling to stay afloat. Their frantic movements were a stark contrast to the calm of the night. They were clearly in distress, and the sight of their tiny forms thrashing in the water made my heart drop. Jessica, driven by her medical instincts, immediately ran to call for help. Her voice was filled with panic and urgency as she sought assistance. I stayed behind with the woman, who remained eerily indifferent. She leaned over the railing, her laughter now mingled with disturbing remarks. "Bye, kids. Mommy loves you," she called out, waving as if bidding farewell to children embarking on a school trip. The cruelty of the situation was overwhelming. Every instinct within me screamed to confront the woman, but I was paralyzed, my mind struggling to process the horror of what was unfolding. The urgency of the situation weighed heavily on me as I watched the helpless children below. Crew members arrived swiftly, their presence a mix of relief and dread. They threw life preservers into the water, attempting to reach the struggling children. The ship's emergency protocols were activated, and an emergency lifeboat was lowered to rescue them. The crew's actions were precise and urgent, driven by the need to save lives. Despite their best efforts, the distance from the ship to the children proved fatal. The lifeboat returned with the somber truth. Both children had succumbed to the cold and darkness of the ocean. The realization was crushing, and the gravity of the situation was almost too much to bear. The woman's reaction was the most chilling aspect of the entire ordeal. As the lifeboat was hoisted back onto the ship, she continued to rock back and forth, her laughter taking on a macabre tone. "Oh good, no more children. I'm free," she muttered repeatedly. Her lack of remorse and the sheer satisfaction she took in the tragedy left me in a state of utter disbelief. The following morning, as the MS Emerald Voyager docked back in Fort Lauderdale, a significant police presence awaited. Rebecca Lawson, the woman responsible for the unspeakable act, was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Her children, aged 8 and 6, had been the victims of a heinous crime that defied comprehension. The aftermath of that night was a nightmare that Jessica and I struggled to process. The trauma of witnessing such an atrocity had a profound impact on us, leaving us both deeply scarred. The holiday we had looked forward to with such anticipation had been marred by an event that highlighted the darkest aspects of human nature. My family has since vowed never to return to a cruise ship. The memory of that night, the chilling indifference of Rebecca Lawson, and the tragic loss of 2 innocent lives will forever haunt us. It serves as a stark reminder that evil can manifest in the most unexpected places, and that the darkest facets of humanity can emerge even in the midst of what is supposed to be a joyous and safe experience. Story 4. I work for a small tech company, and I get along pretty well with my boss, Dave. He's one of those easygoing and friendly guys, so when he invited me to join his family on a cruise, I didn't think twice. It was going to be a 5-day trip just to get away from the daily grind. He brought along his wife, Karen, and their teenage son, Alex. Alex was about 16, a good kid, but, like most teenagers, quiet and always on his phone. The first few days of the cruise were nothing short of amazing. The food was fantastic, the weather was perfect, and we had a great time exploring the different stops. The ship had everything you could want: swimming pools, game rooms, and live shows. Alex mostly kept to himself, hanging around the pool and mingling with other kids his age. Everything seemed perfect. Then, one night, things took a dark turn. I remember going to bed around midnight. My cabin was a couple of doors down from Dave's family suite. I was pretty exhausted after a long day in the sun, so I fell asleep quickly. The gentle rocking of the ship made it easy to drift off. At around 1:30 a.m., I was jolted awake by a loud knock on my door. Groggy and confused, I stumbled out of bed to see what was going on. When I opened the door, there was Dave standing there. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide with panic. "Has Alex come back to your room?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What? Why would he be here?" I replied, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Dave looked at me with a mix of fear and confusion. He never came back to our room after dinner. We thought maybe he crashed here or with one of the other teens. Immediately, a knot formed in my stomach. Something was wrong. We both quickly got dressed and headed to the ship's customer service desk. Karen had already called them, but now we needed to make sure a full search was underway. The crew took it seriously. A teenager missing on a cruise ship was no joke. Within minutes, they announced a search over the loudspeaker, and a team of staff started combing the decks. The ship was massive, like a floating city, so finding someone on it wasn't an easy task. We searched everywhere: the pool deck, the restaurants, the game rooms, and the theaters, but there was no sign of Alex. As the hours passed, panic set in. I could see it in Dave and Karen's faces, and to be honest, I was feeling it too. This was supposed to be a fun, relaxing trip. How had it turned into a nightmare so quickly? By 3 a.m., the ship's crew suggested we start checking some of the closed-off areas, the empty rooms, and parts of the ship that weren't being used. It was a long shot, but at that point, we were desperate. We split into groups, each assigned to a different part of the ship. I ended up with one of the ship's security guards, a big guy with a stern face. We started going through the empty rooms one by one. Most of them were completely dark, the lights off, the beds made. It was eerie how quiet it was, the only sound being the hum of the ship's engines in the background. Then, just as we were about to call it quits, we opened a door and found him. Alex was sitting on the floor, his hands tied behind his back with rope, his mouth gagged with a dirty cloth. His eyes were wide with terror. For a moment, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like something out of a horror movie. We rushed to untie him, and as soon as the gag was removed, he started crying. He was shaking, his face pale. He told me not to say anything. If I told anyone, Alex stammered, barely able to get the words out, he'd kill my family. Who? I asked, my heart pounding. Alex looked around nervously, as if the man might be standing right behind us. A man dressed in black. He grabbed me when I was walking back to the room. He dragged me in here and tied me up. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't some prank or misunderstanding. Someone had deliberately taken him and threatened him, and that someone was still on the ship. We immediately called security. They locked down the area and started reviewing security camera footage, trying to find any sign of the man Alex had described. Meanwhile, Dave and Karen were beside themselves with relief and terror. They couldn't believe what had just happened to their son. Then, things took another unexpected twist. The next morning, after hours of reviewing footage and interviewing staff, security identified a suspect. It was someone we all knew, a guy from our company. I couldn't believe it. He was just a quiet guy from the accounting department. We'd had drinks with him the night before, and he seemed completely normal. But there he was, caught on camera lurking around the empty parts of the ship, following Alex. When security brought him in, he didn't even try to deny it. He just sat there, staring at the ground as they cuffed him and handed him over to the authorities at the next port. It turned out he had some sort of grudge against Dave. He thought kidnapping Alex would scare Dave and ruin him. But he didn't count on the ship's security and the cameras catching him. Even now, months after the cruise, I still think about that night. The way the ship felt so peaceful and safe, only to turn into a place of fear and danger. And that quiet guy from accounting, someone I would have never suspected, planning something so twisted. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to set foot on a cruise ship again. The ocean may be vast, but nowhere is safe when you don't know what kind of monsters might be hiding in plain sight. Before we get into the next story, if you're here for the first time, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories. We need your support, so please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks.